The king, the hero of nations, the pearl and black jewel, the legend, and the top scorer. These are all names given to the Brazilian legend. However, behind these titles, there's a story that must be told. The beginning of Pelé in the Brazilian municipality of Três Corações, in a football-loving family where his father was a football player. The first football star in Pelé's life was Pelé, the goalkeeper of Vasco da Gama. He mentioned in his memoirs that he didn't fully understand the meaning of the word at the time, but knew that it meant football in Irish. Pelé grew up in a humble neighborhood in a small town, learning football from his father. He worked in some cafes and earned money, then learned football from his father. He practiced the sport without cleats, wearing socks stuffed with newspapers and tied with twine. Pelé began playing football with amateur clubs and trained until he reached the youth teams. He also played indoor football, where it was quite well known in the city of Bauru. Indoor football helped Pelé a lot. He says about that period of his life, "I knew then not to be afraid of what might come." Santos and the start, Pelé took his first step towards professionalism with the help of player Waldemar de Brito, who told the Santos administration he would be the greatest player in the world, a prophecy that became reality. He also didn't know that the Brazilian national team and his teammates in the 1962 World Cup would achieve victory over Spain, which De Brito had eliminated in the 1934 World Cup. Pelé became the technical director of Santos and signed his first professional contract with Santos in 1956. Pelé played his first professional match in 1957, where he shone and became the top scorer of Santos at just 16 years old. After his second year at Santos, the Brazilian was called up to the national team. He talks about that time, saying, "After my second year at Santos, it became difficult to go out in the street." The legend continues, "At that time, people were not used to seeing young stars like this. Fans were surprised because at that age, I was playing for the Brazilian national team. They didn't know what awaited them. These fans would see Pelé win his first World Cup title at 17 years old. The first World Cup and fulfilling the promise." We won't start our discussion about Brazil's first World Cup, but rather about the biggest wound of the Brazilian nation, the 1950 Brazilian World Cup in Brazil itself. Nearly 170,000 Brazilian fans left the Maracanã Stadium wandering aimlessly, overwhelmed by sadness, a goal that silenced the stadium and Brazil. Brazil was defeated in the 1950 World Cup final against Uruguay, and the final game ended with 2-1 for Uruguay. Pelé told his father at a young age, at 9 years old, "I will win the World Cup, Dad." It might have been just a hope at that time, but for sure, the king fulfilled his promise. The 1958 World Cup witnessed this. It was Pelé's first World Cup after shining with Santos. Brazil was in a difficult group with the Soviet Union, England and Austria, but they qualified after 2 victories and a draw. Pelé didn't score in the group stage, but his explosive moment started in the knockout stage, where he scored 6 goals in 3 matches, including 3 in the semi-final and 2 in the final. Brazil defeated Wales in the quarter-finals with a goal from Pelé, and in the final they beat the host Sweden with 5 goals. Pelé fulfilled the promise made to his father when Brazil finally won the World Cup, with him being the top scorer and the main star at that moment. That's how Brazil became since then. Before Ronaldo, Romario and others, there was Pelé in the post-World Cup period. Pelé joined the army, where he was 18 years old. Pelé spoke about this period with great pride, saying he believed he would become free, but his friends at Santos told him he would go to military service. He became an example for the youth. He spoke about that time, saying he learned many things, mainly respect for people, speaking about his time in military service. Pelé had many offers from Europe, from clubs like Real Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia, Juventus, and others. Pelé spoke about that time, saying that at that time, player transfers were not common between Europe and South America. The financial differences were not large, and there weren't many of the current financial attractions that lead players to Europe. This was confirmed by Pelé himself, when he said, "We were like a family, spent many years with the players, even after retirement. There were offers from Inter, Real Madrid and Juventus, but he did not accept them. He preferred his family and his mother's beans," as he himself said at that time. Many people denied this, but Brazil witnessed the strength of this young man, the second World Cup and the absence of the legend, and shining in the Intercontinental. Pelé was excluded from the Brazilian team in the 1962 World Cup, where the Samba team won the tournament. Pelé played in the first matches, scored a goal and assisted another, but unfortunately got injured in the second game trying a long-distance shot against Czechoslovakia and ended up injured. He recovered from the injury after the World Cup and led his team to victory in the Intercontinental against any team, defeating Real Madrid with 3 goals. Santos won their first Copa Libertadores title in 1962, with Pelé scoring 4 goals at that time, 2 in the first leg and 3 in the return leg. Pelé then received offers from Europe again, but of course refused. The Triple Crown again, a triple of League, Libertadores and Intercontinental is not easy to achieve again, and even more difficult that he did it twice. In 1963, Santos won this triple again. The King had the majority of Santos's goals, eliminating Botafogo, their opponent, where he scored 3 goals against them. He scored a goal in the final against Boca Juniors and 5 in the Copa Libertadores. In the final of the Intercontinental, a decisive match was played, with Santos winning by a clean goal. Pelé participated in the 1960 World Cup, but didn't really play much. Brazil also didn't play well, falling into a group with Portugal, Hungary and Bulgaria. They were the favorites, of course. Pelé scored a goal in the first game against Bulgaria and became the first player to score goals in 3 consecutive World Cup editions. However, he got injured and didn't participate in the rest of the games. Brazil was surprisingly eliminated in the group stage, but members of the Brazilian Federation convinced Pelé to reconsider his decision to retire. He won the Champions Cup in 1968. 1968 wasn't a new year for the legend, but he prepared for his last dance at the 1970 World Cup. Brazil was in a group with England and Czechoslovakia, winning the first game easily, and the King scoring one of the 4 goals in the second game against England. Brazil won by 1 goal, but that match had a great story behind it. Pelé celebrated a goal he didn't score when Jairzinho crossed from the right and Pelé headed, stopping time for a moment. He celebrated as if he had scored, but it wasn't a goal. Banks defended that. Pelé and the English goalkeeper talked a lot about that moment. Banks said that save changed his life and continued, "It was better than winning the 1960 World Cup. When I die, everyone will remember that scene." Brazil easily passed through the group stage, beating Peru and Uruguay and Italy, where Pelé scored his last World Cup goal against Italy in the final. Brazil was crowned world champion, and Pelé became the king of that nation's history. After the 1974 season, the New York Cosmos signed Pelé, where he helped spread football in America. He won 2 championships with the team, and on October 1st, 1977, he played his last match, which was between his former and current team at the Santos goal. And in the second half, it rained. At that time, the journalists commented that the sky was crying for Pelé's retirement, but if the sky were human, it would have really shed tears, because this legend was one of the greatest scorers in history. Pelé scored 757 goals in 813 official matches.